Welcome to the Not Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
And I'm laughing because I hit 3, and then I almost just sat here and waited for you to talk, which would be fine, except for you wouldn't have had any heads up, and that's not how we've done it in the last, 10 years.
And I would have froze up, is what you're saying? I would have pissed my pants.
Yeah, you can't handle the
pressure. I'm saying the name of the show. Welcome to the first episode of 2020. It's a new year. It's the same show.
So I was going to say, my resolution is to make sure this show is no better than it was last year. Maybe worse.
Our goal is to make this podcast feel like home, you know? So we will never change, even if it could mean profit or just entertainment. We will always be the non-essential podcast.
Reminds me, I was talking to my brother the other day, and he asked something. He's like, "Well, how do podcasts make money?" And I'm like, "I don't know. You're talking to the wrong person for that."
We've been trying for 10 years.
He meant on the more basic level, like, is it sponsors or whatever? And it's like
all of the above. Basically, you got to find that audience that somebody says, like, okay, they have enough of a following, they can sell dick pills.
Yeah, that's their demographics.
Yeah, and once you get that, then you're big enough for a Patreon, and then you're good to go, pretty much. Like, at that point, you can live off this shit
for like a year, and then the audience goes down and the money goes away, and they have to fold. That's the key to our success.
Well, the Patreon pays for like the hosting and stuff. And then you can just eat the dick pills, like, as nourishment. It's, it's really uncomfortable, but technically, you can live off those things for about 2 days. So it's not even, food ain't even a thing.
So it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
You may starve to death, but you'll have a wonderful time while you do.
Well, maybe that Patreon money goes to some things you wouldn't especially be proud about if you're living off of chewables. Anyway, so we've been kind of busy the last couple of weeks. We took last week off for the holidays, but you've been fixing up a house.
I did it the smart way. I spent a bunch of money for a house that was in relatively good condition, and then spent more money to fix it up instead of fixing up my current house that's in relatively bad condition.
Like, you double down.
Right.
So, like, you see a house that's like, this is all right. I bet I can make it worse.
But I'm just going through what you went through a month or two. Well, I guess it's been a couple months now, but so it's not like we're doing major renovations. It's painting and putting in a new floor.
But painting
sucks. I hate. Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, I don't ever want to paint a place again. Mm-hmm. I could buy a house that was like a fucking murder scene, and I'll just try to like put up posters over the blood splatters because I'm just like, I'm so fucking over painting a wall. Why is there a poster
on the floor over here? Long story.
It's just why is the floor covered in posters too?
Because the jerk wouldn't just die. They tried to crawl away.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
they knocked $50 off the price tag, but shit. So you've been busy doing that and doing adult shit. I just kind of have been trying to not get sick, and I feel like I'm failing right now. So if I just zone out, I'm probably throwing up in a trash can or something. But anyway,
leave it in there. It'll just help build our library of sound effects for later on down the road.
Oh, there's no way I wouldn't keep that in the episode. It would be easily our highest listened to one, because it's just like, hey, listen to somebody just fucking vomit all over their mic. But anyway, and a lot of people will be like, how's that different than what you normally do?
Right.
But anyway, if you haven't listened to the show before, every week me and Steve get together and one of us tells a story about something completely random and interesting to them. and hopefully interesting to you. One day we'll pull that off. We really gotta. I gotta work on like the self-deprecation. At a certain point, it's like. At a certain point, it's like have some fucking confidence in what you.
Yeah,
do.
I know, and we've talked about it too, because that is really the key to a lot of things in life, is to like deep down, maybe you believe in the self-deprecation, but you come out and you're like, we're the best show on the internet for random history.
Well, that's what's fucked up is actually like my position on the show is very much like, I think it's all right. You know, I like the show. I like doing it, and I think it comes out good. But once I'm on air, it's like, man, this is shit. I don't know who would waste their time with this. And then I hope for some reason they're with us 30 minutes later.
I was going to say, that's the best part about being like that while you record, because not only is it self-deprecating, but it's kind of like insulting the listener too. Because it's like,
yeah, I mean, I'm fucked up for doing it, but how fucked up are you for believing I could do it? But anyway, I got a little fun, little trip down some international history. This is about the Great Game, and if you don't know what the Great Game was a term given for this intense rivalry that happened between the British and Russian empires over control and influence of Central Asia. This started around the early 1800s and didn't actually end until the early 1900s. So for the better part of a century, like Britain and Russia were in this like territory race. So for Britain, the goal was all centered around India. At this point, Britain considered India the crown jewel, and the only goal for having land was basically to buffer and insulate India from any sort of power grab or hostile takeover. And for Russia, it was simply a land game. It was just more territory meant further influence. And at this point,
I just love to point out that this is two competing countries for control of somebody else's land that was already occupied.
Yeah. The Great Game had a fuck ton of casualties. But yeah, for Russia, it was about just getting more land, and they would have gone after India too if they could have pushed that far. But with the Great Game, there was a lot of, sort of set boundaries and conflict areas that kept India, under British control until they fucked that up. So the Great Game was kind of put into motion on January 12th, 1830, when the British Lord Ellenborough declared an edict that would establish a new trade route from India to Bukhara, which is now Uzbekistan.
Of course.
Turkey, Persia, which is now Iran, and Afghanistan kind of served as this buffer, so Russia wasn't able to obtain any ports on the Persian Gulf. Meanwhile, Russia was trying to press Afghanistan into becoming a neutral zone, which would allow them to use these crucial trade routes they were being blocked from. So this is all geography and territory conflict, and if I'm just speaking, ancient Egyptian to you and you don't understand it, don't worry, I don't understand it really either. Anytime there's like serious history
literally
lessons,
just like Googling map of Middle East and India.
Yeah, and I can't fucking follow it, and I don't try to. Geography is totally in one ear and out the other for me. But you kind of have to know what the Great Game is to appreciate kind of what's happening in the story I wanted to tell. So let's move on to one single noteworthy incident that happened really early in this territory race, and then we can get back to how the Great Game panned out overall a little bit later. So around 1838, the British sent Colonel Charles Stoddart to Bukhara on behalf of the East India Company to try to arrange an alliance against the Russian Empire, who were busy just increasing their expansion at a rate that the British were like, what the fuck? Like, we gotta stop this. But of course their plan was just send one guy to try to make a peace treaty with the ruler of Bukhara. The ruler of Bukhara was a man named Nasrullah Khan, and like any good British diplomat, Stoddart found a way to piss him off right away. So in Bukhara, dignitaries were expected to dismount their horses upon arrival, and you could either lead your horse through the city square or leave the horses outside, but the point is you got off your horse when you met the emir, or the ruler. So Nasrullah Khan was the emir of Bukhara, and when you went up to meet him, you were off your horse and you were supposed to bow. Stoddart didn't know this and probably didn't care to learn before the trip, so he just acted like a typical British military douche and stayed on his horse, saluting the emir from the saddle as if he was just some dude. Which, I mean...
Yo, what's up? Hey, this place doesn't smell half as bad as they said it would.
You guys got fish and chips here? So, and to be fair, yeah, Nasrullah Khan actually is just some dude, but he's in charge of the region and of your life at that point, so maybe get off the fucking horse.
Yeah.
Stoddart...
Diplomacy 101 is to understand that different cultures and different areas have their own very important traditions, I guess, or whatever you want to call it. But rules for conducting yourself, and that it's important to learn them prior to going to those
especially
places.
If you're on a diplomat thing, like you have to know the power dynamic at play here, especially when the British kind of fuck you over and make you go alone to try to broker a peace. Stoddart also didn't bring a gift, which, if you're visiting a man who happened to be nicknamed the Butcher, I feel like you kind of get what you have coming to you. So Nasrullah the Butcher Khan, which sounds like a wrestler.
Now I'm picturing it right in, like I say, and be like, oh man, yeah, we could make this area nice and this area. Hey, pretty nice place you got here. We can spruce this place up. Can I get some pastrami? They said you're a butcher.
All right, so Nasrullah Khan, seeing this fucking clown just enter his city, just gave Stoddart a death stare after this salute and walked off without a word. The details aren't clear, unfortunately, but Stoddart continued to bumble his way through this visit, committing gaffe after gaffe every time he met with the emir. And finally, Nasrullah Khan was just so insulted by this British ass. And at this point, it's also worth noting he was pretty convinced that the British Empire was a weakened nation. So he was like, fuck it, throw him in the bug pit. Which was maybe more famous than any single individual in all of Bukhara. So the bug pit was a 4-meter deep hole, and guards would just periodically dump scorpions, bugs, and rodents on our good colonel. It sucks shit. It sounds like one of the fucking worst.
It puts the rodents on its skin, or else it gets the scorpions again.
Yeah, it gets some scorpions. Stoddart would have accomplices smuggle notes out of the pit for him for colleagues in India and to even family in England, but no rescue ever appeared. After many months, an executioner climbed down into the pit with orders to behead Stoddart immediately if he did not convert to Islam. Stoddart finally did the correct thing in one of these situations and immediately agreed. This was much to Nasrullah's surprise and pleasure, so much so he even pulled Stoddart out of the bug pit and placed him in a much better situation where he was under house arrest in the chief of police's home.
Which was full of bugs and
which was also
rodents.
A bug pit.
Right.
It was a bug bowl. So during this time, Stoddart would meet with the emir several times and actually started to make some headway with Nasrullah and actually got him to seriously consider allying himself with the British against Russia. Meanwhile, while he's trying to stay alive and also somehow get this peace to come about, The British were so caught up in trying to prop up their figurehead ruler in Afghanistan, which was just a fucking mess of a conflict, that they mostly just ignored the fact that they had lost this man in Bukhara. They were in so many fights and disputes that they didn't really have the resources, and by all accounts, they didn't really have the desire to go after Stoddart.
You know what? Now I'm piecing together in my head this situation where it wasn't just that Stoddart was ignorant of the how to conduct himself here in this foreign land, but he was probably very just rude to the British people. They just didn't like him. That's why they sent him by himself and oh yeah, you're.
It's funny that you should say that. We'll get back to it. That does come up. So, Britain wasn't really interested in getting Stoddart back. The rescue attempt would come from one man in a very roundabout, completely fucking doomed to fail way. Captain Arthur Connolly was an evangelical Protestant from Dublin whose stated goals were to unite Central Asia under Britain, Christianize fucking everything, and abolish slavery. Nothing that would ever go over well with Nasrullah Khan. So, before he ended up going to Bukhara, Connolly was kind of going to Khanate region to Khanate region, talking to the various Khans, telling him what he and the British wanted to do, and the Khans of the region were actually kind of receptive to him and polite, but not to the message or the goal. They were pleased to have Connolly, but they were always yeah, we're not doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very tough sell where they're hey, look, you can ally with us, so fight for us, and in exchange, we'll basically say that we're going to overhaul
everything.
And
you
also,
believe.
Also, just if you don't mind, throw out your beliefs and take ours.
Yeah, even when those beliefs are bad, slavery and shit, it's who the fuck is this random white dude who just showed up and told us basically the crux of our system, which is our religion and this horrible fucking institution, but at that point it was ingrained. They were who the fuck are you again? Give them some dinner and tell them to go away.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's walking into a bar full of alcoholics and trying to preach the virtues of abstinence, of not drinking. It's well, your message might be right, but it's never going to go over well delivered that way.
And there's so much getting rid of slavery was great, but it is a great noble goal. But there's so much other shit that Britain was doing in this time in these regions. Like you pointed out, it's two countries who have nothing to do with Central Asia trying to take over Central Asia.
You don't want the Russians to take your land. Let us have it.
Right.
It's how about both of you fuck off?
Right. So, in one region, Connolly received a letter from Stoddart stating that Nasrullah Khan, again, this is a guy nicknamed the Butcher, was interested in hearing Connolly's message. The Khan of this region warned Connolly that Nasrullah was just a fucking dick, and this was probably a trap, but Connolly ignored it and set out to talk with the Emir and try to free Stoddart. So neither Connolly or Stoddart were in on the intention behind the letter, but it ultimately ended up being a fucking trap for Connolly. Connolly was pretty astounded to see how emaciated and haggard Colonel Stoddart had become in his imprisonment, but Nasrullah initially treated Connolly pretty well. But in the initial letter to Connolly, Nasrullah demanded a reply directly from Queen Victoria, or at least this was his excuse, and when Connolly didn't have one, he got very enraged with both of the Britons. Their situation was made worse in January 5th, 1842, when Afghan militants massacred the British Kabul garrison, which only a single British doctor escaped death or capture to tell India the story. seeing just what a clusterfuck the British Empire was in this conflict, and the fact that Britain was just way in over their heads trying to control anything outside of India here, Nasrullah lost any interest in a British-Bukhara alliance and tossed Stoddart and Connolly into prison, although they did avoid the bug pit this time.
Well, good for them, I guess. Yeah.
A few months later, Khan had Stoddart and Connolly brought to the square in front of the fortress, and the crowd watched as both men were forced to dig their own graves. Upon completion, their hands were tied and they were forced to kneel. Colonel Stoddart used his last words to dismiss the emir as a tyrant before he was beheaded. For Connolly, he was offered the chance that Stoddart was offered to convert to Islam to save his life, but Connolly firmly refused and was also beheaded. Stoddart died at the age of 36, Connolly 34. What's kind of interesting is that we only really know the details of what happened to Stoddart and Connolly when Reverend Joseph Wolfe went to Bukhara a year later to seek them out and figure out what the fuck happened to these two.
We haven't got any desperate pleas for rescue for a while.
Yeah.
What's up?
He learned that they had been executed, and in fact, the only reason Nasrullah spared him was because he thought the Reverend looked so fucking ridiculous in his canonical garb that it made him laugh uncontrollably. Like, Nasrullah Khan was just a fucking asshole. Like, for real.
Well, yeah.
When the British public got word of Stoddart and Connolly's fate, the papers praised Stoddart for his sense of honor and duty and for having a, quote, fiery temper, which probably means he should never have gone to Bukhara. But yeah, that's a noble fucking quality for a diplomat.
Right.
So like,
they got him pretty far. Yeah.
So like, I mean, like the story always paints Stoddart as kind of this buffoon who didn't know the customs, but you also have to imagine he probably was like, he probably called Nasrullah Khan a dick. And in that way, I relate to him. Like, I fuck up a lot of shit and then I'm rude. So I probably would have gotten killed by him too. The public called for some retaliation against Bukhara, but the military and political authorities were getting fucked up in this great game and made no attempt at retaliation. The two officers were never avenged. As for the great game itself, all you need to understand is that basically Britain and Russia were in this territory race, and for the British, their aggressiveness in the region threw them into 4 wars involving attempts to try and control Afghanistan, Bukhara, and Turkey. So 4 wars over the course of about 40 years, and Britain lost all of them.
Yeah. Well, to me, the non-historian, but and I, not knowing about this conflict really at all until just now, it sounds to me like that typical thing where Britain, and I'm basing this on a certain other country that me and you know very well, where they come in and they just feel like they're so superior to these like Middle Eastern savages, basically. Like, oh, well, why shouldn't we be able to just come in, and of course they'll want, to adopt our ways and work with us because we're better than them. Right. And they're just like...
and then when they don't want to do that, we will try to force it. And then turns out there's factions all over the place who don't agree on anything except that we suck.
Right. But... yeah, I can't imagine any situation like back then or today where they're like, Steve, there's this country that's probably kind of hostile, but maybe not, but we think they'll go for this offer. How about let's go over there and talk them into it? It's like, okay. It's like, I mean, by let's, I mean you go do it. You're like, no.
Right. Well, the interesting thing about these wars is like, at least like here, like there's no argument really. Britain lost these conflicts. Nowadays, it's a really fucked up thing where it's like really nobody wins in a modern war. There's even in like the most evil capitalist way, the profit never outweighs the expense. But nowadays we can tell, like, there's the illusion of like, oh, you'll see some asshole on TV be like, mission accomplished, and it's like, but it's like we're still fighting it 5 years later, and just like,
right.
But here it's like,
and
well,
none of
at
the
least
outcomes that we wanted occurred. Well, yeah, and that's the messed up thing about war too, and I think it's probably more muddled now than it used to be, because it used to be like war was won when you now owned this other person's land. Right. And now it's like I don't want to say
if you do that,
we're like we kind of recognize, like, no, it's not right to just go take over another country, but we'll still start the war. It's like, well, but now you don't really have an end goal.
Right.
Like,
because now it's like it's still that same idea, but now you're trying to go into a place and then you want to put your guy in charge of it. Yeah, you want to install somebody that'll be friendly to you. But you have to convince the people that it's their guy. Right, and that is, I believe we're batting for 600,000. Yeah. As far as actually pulling that off. So Britain lost these wars, and after just all these failures, and they never pushed back on Bukhara for the officer's death. They got into conflicts over Bukhara, but it was never about Connolly or Stoddart. Britain pretty much gave Russia a clean sweep of the area. Over the next 40 years, Russia subdued the entire area of Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan. And the Great Game... The Great Game ended in 1907 with the Anglo-Russian Convention of 1907, where the last bit of territory to fight over was Persia, where they agreed on a Russian North Zone, a mostly independent Central Zone, and a British-controlled Southern Zone. They ironed out a specific borderline that gave Britain control of Afghanistan, but make no mistake, Britain got pretty fucked up by all of this. Russia would have this dominance of Central Asia that would last until 1991 when the Soviet Union fell. The only little follow-up note is that the term The Great Game came from Arthur Connolly himself.
So they'll name the war not after him, but they'll But
they won't fucking come help him.
I'm being held by this guy. It's like, if only there was something we could do. It's like, you could come get me. And they're like, it's way over there, though. And,
I'm not going there. That guy's named the Butcher.
It's the Butcher, yeah. Have you heard what he does? He throws people in pits and puts bugs on them.
Maybe they should have...
Yes, I'm aware that he does that.
Maybe they should have just done a letter correspondence with him. Because all you seem to really want to do is talk to the Queen. And you could just forge her signature.
Yeah, they could have called that guy's dressed up so weird. Oh, well, I guess he came after their death anyway, but so that is Queen Elizabeth. Oh, you thought Elizabeth was a woman's name? No.
It would have been the first case of a dude getting catfished in all of history. But yeah, that's the story of Stoddart and Connolly and the Great Game.
Yeah,
it kind of fit the wheelhouse of the failed expedition sort of thing we've talked about before, but also a little more broad scale history than I'm used to doing. But I liked it. I thought it was an interesting little.
My biggest takeaway is once I'm done painting this new house, I'm going to immediately begin work on my bug pit.
You know how fucking scary that would be. I would have to find a way to end it all. I don't know how you just sit there and let people dump scorpions on you.
I wonder if it's one of those things I've heard of immersion therapy where if you're afraid of spiders, they just make you stick your hand in a bin of spiders and then put a tarantula on you to crawl around until
that. Yeah,
you get over. But I wonder if that would I mean I wouldn't voluntarily do that to get over those things, but I wonder if after a while you're just annoyed. It's no longer terrible. You're just sure.
I mean, I don't know if it's possible for the pendulum to swing. Get me around spiders. I'm I'm frightened and pissed in like equal measure. So it's like I'm not gonna get like more pissed and less scared. It's like I'm gonna I'm erratic and irrational about it.
And I wonder, do they make you play nice? I mean, scorpions are gross. They're like armored spiders. So you take spiders, which I hate, and you add armor and a weapon on the back.
Yeah.
But like everybody views scorpions as like, oh, they're deadly. And it's like, well, they're kind of like anything else, where most of them, it's not deadly unless
just
you're
little fucking assholes who
they're like bee stings, like
make you swell up and shit.
My point is, you can smash them. Like even if you don't have shoes or anything, like it gets to a point where you can't get away from them. So wouldn't you just like start killing them? Like
I just read, like anytime I think about scorpions, and this says more about me, is like it's weird. I don't have the same phobia of them as I do of spiders. And I think it's because in like The Mummy 2, like The Rock just in the beginning of that movie just starts eating a scorpion, and it looked so dumb and silly to me. Because it's like stinging his hand while he's trying to eat it, and it's like, and it's how he makes a deal with the devil.
I could try to pull that BS and be like, yeah, I'm not afraid of scorpions because I'm in Ohio. They do not pose a threat to me on a regular basis here.
Yeah.
But no, I have no desire to be around scorpions.
I say, like, I don't have a phobia. Yeah, if one crawled in here, I'd probably move out.
Yeah, it's like, this house is yours.
Well, you won.
I'll sign the deed over right now. Here you go.
What's weird is there's a... Like, the bug pit itself has been preserved as, like, a historical space. And for some reason, it's not enough to just show people the pit. So they put fucking mannequins down there, like, hunched up and shit. And, like, and see, this is how they would hit them with the bugs. And it's like, I don't need that fleshed out. Yeah. Like, I understand. Small hole, and they poured shit on them.
I kind of want to go see it now, though.
Well, just
it seems like
on over to Uzbekistan.
And don't get me wrong, we've got them over here left and right, too. The old, like, roadside attractions where it's like, oh, the world's biggest toothpick. And it's like, come on, family, let's go see that. And you walk in, and it seems like something, because you don't really need more than about 5 seconds of looking at it. You're like, yep, sure is a pit with bugs.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, a bug pit sounds like something on the road you would see, like, just before you get to Vegas, there would be some small town, like, come see our bug pit. And yeah, I feel like you gotta.
Yeah, I mean, that's, in fairness, if I was on a road trip and saw that, the sign, I would.
And then you get there and it's a brothel, and you're like, oh, fuck, that sounds horrible. And then you go inside anyway, because, well, when in Rome.
Hey, the crabs are free. Yeah.
Anywho.
Gross.
That's it's a gross way to end it. But I mean, when you're living off of dick pill chewables. Anyway, yeah, happy to be back with a new year. For however long we can keep doing this. I'm kind of surprised we're still finding stuff, but...
Oh, I've put it in my will that when I die to be buried with my microphone in the casket so we can keep going.
That would be so fucking spooky. Like, it's like, wait a minute, it says he's online. He told me to be there for recording time after he died, and... Jesus. Anyway, we'll be back next week with either Steve or the ghost of Steve. Telling us what the grave is like. Yeah. So, see you next time.
Later.